This is the examination of the hidden human condition.
You're listening to the Hidden Killers Podcast.
This is the Hidden Killers Podcast with Tony Bruschi.
We are talking with author and reporter Leah Sottile today about Chad and Lori Daybell. When we go back to the beginning of Chad and his books, which really weren't very popular, it didn't really have a good following. He's a horrible writer. But, it spoke to some people. At the end of the day, it's the message that seems to matter, and it certainly resonated. Where did Chad begin doing this? Like, why did he start writing these books? What was his inspiration to become what I think he thought of himself as a prophet, if you will, in his own little break off of LDS?
Yeah, it's a journey that I traveled down. So he always wanted to be a writer, and in fact, kind of got his start, I would say, working for the student newspaper at Brigham Young University in Provo, Utah, which is not far from the town he grew up in. I went there and went to the special collections there to read all of his articles. And, you saw a young person just like I was, experimenting with their voice, but also really embracing, even then, kind of a conspiratorial side of the LDS faith that I thought was very interesting. At a certain point, journalism wasn't enough for him. He worked in newspapers. Journalism is about writing about facts. Mm-hmm. And I think that he had big aspirations to write fiction. And there was a trend really in the 1990s, late 90s, early 2000s, when these what we would call near-death experience writers were becoming very popular in America, but also very much so in Utah and in the LDS faith. People who said, I died, I saw Jesus, and I came back to tell you, the Mormon people are the chosen ones. That became very interesting to Chad. He started to talk about that maybe he had his own near-death experience. People in his family that I talked to said they never heard him refer to this ever. Mm-hmm. But he not only claims one, but two near-death experiences. And he started his own book publisher at a certain point. So I think he saw there was a real economic benefit from publishing other near-death experience writers. So he started doing that. Some of them became very popular. And then at a certain point, he started writing his own books. All of his books are couched as fiction, but they often do start, I've read all of them, they start with an author's note that says, over time, this is fiction, but some of it might be real. And then you see him kind of becoming more and more bold, like maybe not being so afraid that the church will cramp down on him and saying, this is real. I believe this is what's happening.
And within those writings, obviously, he didn't have a huge following, but Lori was drawn into this. Before we even get to Lori entering the picture, I want to get this kind of some conjecture on this, because it'll be important for, I think, later in the conversation. Chad going into this, writing these books, seeing that there's some sort of financial gain here, however small it may be, but it's something. And it gives him some purpose. It gives him some attention. It seems like this is kind of a loner type individual, really didn't have it most of his life. And now suddenly, ooh, look at me. I write these things and there's enough people that go, oh, must be something to this. Do you think he believed these books, his writings, these experiences that he had? Or, was this kind of a narcissistic ruse of, hey, this seems to be getting a response, I'm going to keep going down this road?
It's hard to know. Honestly, I think maybe if in his forthcoming trial this next spring, I think maybe we'll learn more about how true those beliefs were to him. I mean, certainly he was building a sort of mindset that you see over time that I've observed really at the far right political fringe, a kind of, uber libertarian mentality, talking about committing violence against liberals or that people need to escape to Idaho to be safe. Yeah. I think that he seemed to believe that, he moved his family from Utah, where they'd always lived, very suddenly north. His wife, Tammy, was very surprised. He said, I kind of spoken to God. I heard a voice and it said, we need to move to Idaho. And she was like, really? Oh, okay. And they did go. So, I think that alone shows that he believed in enough. He was willing to uproot his very large family to a place that they had no network. But within these circles I've been telling you about, there is this idea that Utah is broken, that it's not going to be the new Zion where the Mormon people will be reborn. When Jesus comes again, they will be lifted up, and saved. But there are people who believe that Idaho, specifically Rexburg, Idaho, will be that place, that's the new Zion. And it seems silly to talk about, but there are people who really think that. So, in terms of belief, that is what we know. At least he believes those things. Over time, he became such a fixture on these circuits because of his books. He gave a lot of speeches. He would do a lot of home meetings with small groups talking about his ideas and, kind of doing kooky things like using pendulums to discern, people's questions, very occult practices. So whatever it was, it was working for him in a way that I think any other writing he'd done previously hadn't.
Why Rexburg?
Boy, I wish I could answer that. I think that Idaho is a fascinating place. I've spent, much of my career reporting a lot in Idaho. It's a state where there's a long history of an embrace, not a mainstream embrace, but enough of an embrace of fringy people. So in the northern part of the state, you've had groups like the Aryan Nations that moved there and found a lot of support, and that, were also chased out by the community. In southern Idaho, that is, really an extension of Utah. It's a very LDS area. And, at the same time, through like the 1970s and the 1980s, it was very popular for the John Birch Society, which is kind of, a group you don't hear a lot about these days. But at the time, it was a real conspiratorial political group who believed, the communists were going to come streaming over the borders. The world was going to end at any time. John Birch Society membership was very popular with members of the LDS Church. So I think that over the years, the Salt Lake Valley has really diversified. It's become very similar to a lot of other Western cities. It's changed a lot. The percentage of LDS people that live there, where the church is based, is very low at this point. So I think by going to Rexburg, you're going to a place that has a BYU campus, it has a temple, and is very heavily Mormon. Something like 80% of the population there is LDS. So you move there, you're around maybe more people that have a history of kind of embracing these sort of John Birchy ideas and that kind of thing. That's the best explanation I can give.
That makes sense. I mean, kind of the, conditioning of the area, and then that's kind of their base level, and it seems a lot more normal, if you will, or common. That is the norm in that area then.
Sick of the ads?
We are too.
Start listening with no commercials now and get access to all of our episodes in advance of everyone else.
Become a True Crime Today Premium Plus subscriber on Apple Podcasts.
Search True Crime Today Premium Plus on Apple Podcasts or go to our podcast page and sign up now.
True Crime Today Premium Plus.
Sign up now.